What's up, guys? It's your boy Dark Sage back with another video, and today we're finna be doing What If Deku Was a Different Breed, Part 1. But before we get into the video, make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe, because it'll help a young dude out. But we won't talk about that. So, yeah, let's get into the video. We see Izuku in the sky with 3 people surrounding him. Deku looks at all of them and is like, y'all weak ass niggas can't do shit. As this would piss off the 3 as they'd rush at Izuku. One of them would open a portal before, rushing at him. As once 2 of them would meet Deku, they'd begin throwing a flurry of attacks. Deku would easily be dodging and blocking this, as he would grab the both of their heads and slam them together. But once he did this, Deku would be caught from behind, no homo, as Deku would be forced into a portal, as he'd say, shit, as he'd think to himself, fuck, I wasn't on guard. As Deku would be falling, is when this portal reopened, Deku was in the arms of a green-haired woman. He was a baby. Deku could hear the crying of another child, but he didn't give a fuck. He just wanted to know where he was. And so, basically, Deku would look around as the doctors would see Deku, as they'd say, "Hi, little guy. That's your mom." As Deku would look at Inko, as he'd say. Or he'd think to himself, huh, that's my mother? What are they talking about? As Deku would continue looking around. Mind you, he's not crying like Izumi. As he'd just be looking around, as the doctors would be saying, what's he looking for? As Deku would hear this, he would stop looking, trying not to draw attention to himself, as he'd begin fake crying. The doctors would assume everything's normal. They'd give Deku and his sister their shots, and Inko would take them home. We now see, Inko with Hisashi in the 2 children's new bedroom. They would have 2 cribs and a half pink, half blue room. As Deku would say, huh, so this is my domain for the time being. How fucking bothersome. This Deku would still be angry that he let his guard down enough to be pushed into a portal. As Deku wasn't really worried about it. He wasn't worried about it though. He'd already known that, he had set bombs on all 3 of them, so he could detonate them at any time. And, he already planned on doing that. As Deku would semi-decently snap his fingers, seeing that he was still a baby. We now cut to the alternate reality. We see 3 men in a bar. One of the men is asking for a beer, and the others are gambling. All of a sudden, the man that was asking for the beer's head would explode, as the 2 other men would look at him as they'd say, "What the hell?" As they would go to run over towards the man, but, before they could get there, instant death. Them niggas exploded, just like that last nigga. As their bodies would lay on the As their bodies would lay on the ground completely bleeding out, Deku, he'd get the knowledge of this, as he'd smile and say, "Damn bastards." As Deku would then, since he was kinda tired, he'd drift off to sleep. We're gonna have a time skip of 4 years. And in this 4 years, Deku, he's showed incredible feats of strength, like lifting up cars as a 2-year-old, and being extremely quick and pretty smart. Deku, was also not able to get hit, whatsoever. Deku's body, it was always covered in some type of aura. like it was protecting him or something. But Deku knew what it was, but he wouldn't turn it off just in case something ever happened. But this was basically heat waves, to put it specifically. Deku could, well, at this moment, Deku could control his heat waves to protect him at pretty much fucking any time. Anytime Deku's body would be about to be harmed, the heat would form into a physical, what's the word I'm looking for? A physical shield that would basically grasp around Deku's body as it would be used to protect him. Each time Deku was, well, damn near hit by his father for acting up, this shield would basically burn Hiyashi's hand. Well, after a few fucking attempts of trying to hit this nigger, well, shit, he eventually stopped. He'd wise up and think to himself, this must be his quirk. Looks like hitting him won't do any good. As Hiyashi would just say, well, then go to your room and don't come out. Deku would pout, saying that, well, he was a grown-ass man being sent to his room. I'll say that his name's still Izuku. I'll say, fuck. Inko. His name was Izuku originally, and this name just popped into Inko's head. Why not? Yes, so Deku's still Izuku, you know what I'm saying? And you know what I'm saying. But yeah. After a few more days of, well, Deku getting in trouble, it would finally be time for him and his sister to go to the Quirk doctor. Deku, well, damn near knew he didn't have a quirk. Like, this nigga didn't have a quirk. Deku had something different. This was no quirk. This shit deadly as fuck. Like, never mind. Y'all will see. Y'all will see. This nigga's a different breed. Yes, he's a different breed. But yeah, they would get to the Quirk doctor as Izumi would go in as she would be tested first. She would have, water manipulation. She could basically control, at the time, small droplets of water. She would go over to her mother as she'd spray her in the face with the water. As Deku would then be next up. He would go into the testing room. They would start to test Izuku. Deku would show his incredible feats of strength and speed. Like, this nigga moves at like Mach 40 on some Koro Sensei shit. Deku would also show his extreme intelligence. As the doctors would be astounded at this. How this boy could have no quirk but have all of this knowledge, and his physical abilities were top of the fucking top. As they would go back to Inko as they'd say, your son, he doesn't have a quirk. As Inko would start to frown, but the doctors would say, but that doesn't quite mean he can't become a hero. We personally believe that he can become a hero. That boy is going to be the first hero with no quirk. His speed, it's impeccable, along with his strength. And he's only 4 years old, and his knowledge about things is out of this world. Y'all see what I did there? Out of this world? No, that wasn't funny. No, well, okay, I'm sorry. But yeah, they would continue to, dick ride Izuku until it was eventually time for them to leave. The doctors would give Izumi and Izuku 2 lollipops each, as they would take the lollipops as they would thank the man that was testing them, as they'd go home. On the way back, Deku would catch his sister looking at him, as he'd say, "What are you looking at?" Izumi would say, "You don't have a quirk. You're quirkless." As Deku would say, "Yeah, and so?" Is Deku, well, at the time being, would change his voice from, he could change his voice from fucking manly to kitty, only because, well, it would be kind of weird if Deku were to talk like this. "Yeah, so, even if I was, what's the problem with me being quirkless?" Yeah, that would be kind of weird for a 4-year-old to be talking like that. But yeah, Deku would say all of that, as Izumi would say, "Didn't you know? Quirkless people are basically trash, and you being quirkless makes you trash." As Inko wouldn't be hearing any of this, saying that, well, the music was turned up a little loud, Deku would say, "I bet I could still beat you, though." As Izumi would smile as she'd say, "Is that a challenge?" As Deku would basically nod his head, and when they got home, well, Izumi would run to her dad as she'd say, "Daddy, Daddy, Izuku challenged me, and he doesn't even have a quirk." As Inko would see Hiyashi's face when, well, his daughter had said that, as Inko would say, "Well, Hiyashi, Izuku doesn't have a quirk, but the doctor said that doesn't mean he can't become a hero." As Izumi would butt in and she'd say, Mom, he can't become a hero. He's quirkless. There's never been a quirkless hero. Plus, look at him, he's weak." As Izumi has never really seen, well, no, fuck that. I'll say his family has never really seen his strength. I'll say that Inko just thought the doctors were exaggerating. Fuck that. Why not? That'll make this more interesting anyway. As Inko would say, yeah, Izuku, he is kind of frail. As Izuku would think to himself, "Frail? Bitch, do you know what's under my clothing? Nothing but muscle. I'm a god, bitch." As he would smirk on the outside world. As Hiyashi would say, "Wait, Izumi, what was this about Izuku challenging you?" As he'd still have a semi-decent frown on his fucking face. Shit's finna be wiped, whole ass nigga. As Izumi would say, "Yeah, in the car. I said he was quirkless, and he said he could beat me." As Hiyashi would say, "Guess we'll have to teach that quirkless little kid some manners." I swear. As Deku would think to himself, parents are annoying. Doesn't he know I can hear his thoughts? But, yeah, I'm gonna tell you what Izuku's power is soon, but, just give me some time. As Deku would basically walk outside with Izumi and his parents as they go in their backyard. Izumi, well, she'd start forming water spikes, small water spikes out of the humidity in the air that she would condense into, well, water spikes. Is Deku would just sit there as his eyes were closed. Deku, he would think that it was time for him to show something, just a little bit. As Deku's eyes would open, as his eyes would then be yellow, as they were originally. Deku would then look at his sister, as his father would say, "Let the match begin." As Izumi would, well, send water spikes at Izuku, but his, well, heat waves, they would come into play as they'd form a shield around Izuku. As Deku would say, "Is that the best that you can do?" As Izumi would form a fucking water dragon, small water dragon that I guess could do some damage. I don't fucking know. She'd send it at Izuku, but again, this would do literally no damage, as Izuku would say. Is that all? As Izumi would grit her fucking teeth as she'd say, "You bastard." Is in a final attempt, she'd try to run up and punch Deku. Deku would catch her fist, sweep her feet, and he wouldn't hit her face. He would miss as Deku would punch the ground. He'd miss on purpose though, cause like, yeah, typical anime shit. Deku would punch the ground as he'd form a damn crater in that bitch, and it would be kind of deep too, like at least. Why not? It would be at least like 50 meters under the earth would be completely shattered. Like that shit would be cracked. Under the concrete, yeah, that shit was fucking cracked. As Izuku would have gotten up, is he'd have looked over at Hisashi. I don't remember which one. I think it's Hisashi. Yeah, I'll go with Hisashi. Yeah. He would look over at Hisashi as he'd say, "Is that good enough for you, father?" He would just give a cocky smirk. Hisashi would grit his teeth, but he'd also be glad to know that his son wasn't weak. As his opinion on Deku would have changed then and there. Deku would have been okay with this, as he no longer held a grudge up against his. No, never mind. He kind of did, because like, even like if he was quirkless and he didn't just show this feat of strength, Deku knows that his parents were, or Hisashi would have abused him or neglected him, just because Deku knows about how people with no quirks are. Deku has seen people, naked people, being leashed around by girls, literal girls. Like they're men, quirkless men. Like I'll say that 5%, 6%, fuck it, 7% of the population's quirkless. As Izuku, well, he was pretty much, it didn't matter if he was quirkless or not, because this nigger was a god. As Izuku would then, after, well, beating Izumi, help her up, as he'd pat her on the back and say, "Get stronger. Maybe one day you'll actually put up a decent fight." As Deku would know that his sister had the pretty much opposite of his power. Hint, hint. As kind of opposite, like 50% opposite. All I'm gonna say is Deku has a half and half quirk. That's all I'm gonna say. But yeah, Deku, well, he would then go back up to his room. He'd say, I wonder. Deku's arm would turn into a metallic black fucking steel. It would be a claw. Deku would have a diamond in the middle of his hand. Deku would just think to himself, ignite. A burst of, well, I'll give him, yeah, he'll have different, okay. Deku's first flame fire, or, flame type was his, well, original flame type, which will be hellfire. Then Deku would say stage 2. The fire would then turn white. Deku would say, "So, I've gotten this far in this small body. I wonder if I can go up to stage 3 and 4. Deku would call, well, his white fire, his phantom fire. He would then say stage 3. Deku's arm, well, it would go a little numb, but he could still produce the fire. This time it would be a purple fire. Deku would say, So, I can use this one as well. Is Deku will call this one Poison Flame, saying that, well, it kind of poisoned, pretty much. Anything it fucking touched. As Deku would then say stage 4. As once he summoned this fire, a demon head would form of basically smoke. As it would be demons fucking smoking off of this bitch. Like, how should I put this? Alright, so Deku has a fire in his hand, and there's smoke going up. The smoke is basically demon heads, as they would be laughing, but when Izuku used this fire, his arm, it started to burn heavily. As Deku would wave his hand as he'd put out the fire. As Deku would say, damn it. As he would turn his arm back into a regular human's arm. As mind you, Deku would still only be 4. Is shit. Deku's arm would be completely burned. Like it would be burned pretty badly. This Deku would say, damn it. I can't even go up to stage 4. That means I have no chance of going up to stage 10. It sucks. As Deku would just look at his arm as he'd say before, I could at least make it to stage 100. No problem at all. Fuck. He'd say I could at least make it to stage 100 with no problem at all. As he then think to himself, so, I am 4 years old, I guess. Plus, I'm in a new world that I barely know anything about. Deku would know that this world is based on quirks, and they'd have a hero system instead of vigilantes. As Deku would be in his old world, Deku would be a vigilante. He'd basically be a Batman type nigga, going around beating niggas just for the fun of it. Nah, Batman don't beat niggas just for the fun of it. Who beats niggas just for the fun of it? Saitama. He'd be a Saitama ass nigga. He'd fight for fun if, you challenged him. And if you fucked with him, like, tried to rob him or some shit, he'd try to kill your ass. But, yeah. That would basically be Deku's old life. But Deku would, eventually doze off after he'd be knocked out because, he couldn't really take the pain. And after Deku woke up, his arm was still burning. As Deku would say, fuck. He would then walk downstairs as he could see his mother, his father, and his sister eating dinner. As they tried to call him to wake up a few times, but after the 3rd time of calling him, they just decided to let him rest. As Deku would come down, as they'd say, Izuku, or Inko would say this, Izuku, what happened to your arm? As Deku would say, nothing, Mom, don't worry about it. As Deku would just, get a bunch of ice as he'd go upstairs to the bathtub. As he'd run some freezing cold water. As Deku would, jump in that bitch. As he would pour the ice in as well. As Deku would rest his arm in that water. As he would then, use his right hand. I'll say he burned his left hand. As Deku, no. He burned his right hand. Yeah. He burned his right hand. Or right arm. As Deku would use his left arm, or left hand, to basically form an enchantment, to be precise. This enchantment would basically be a healing enchantment. Deku would know it. This burn would leave scarring, but at least the pain would be away. As Deku would use this enchantment to heal himself. As after he'd have done this, Deku would have, well, drained the water instead of taking a bath and sitting in his own dirt. Deku would have decided to just take a shower and get clean instead. As he'd have done this, as Deku would have rinsed his arm under that water. As Deku would have looked at it and said, huh, so I'm gonna need to do some more training. So this sucks. As Deku would have finished up, he would have gone to, to his room. Deku would have a huge library. He would look for, a story about him. Deku really wanted to know if they had him in their history books, seeing that, Deku was kind of famous from where he was, or more, he was famous from where he originated from. As Deku wanted to see if he was famous here. As Deku would scroll his bookshelf left and right, as he'd eventually find it. The Demon That Made It Out of Hell. Series Chapter 1. As Deku would open the book and he'd begin to read. He'd read the book as it would consist of information such as this. There was a young boy, a young black-haired boy, with an extraordinary power. The people, they thought he was more or less a witch for the power that he possessed. This boy, he could control flames and metal. It was extraordinary the way he would use his power. And the boy was so smart. It was sort of a shame once he died. The boy could come up with all sorts of medicines to heal the people, but they didn't want anything from that witch, or the demon, as they'd call him. The young boy would always smile as he'd be nice to the villagers, until the day that they wanted him dead. In the midnight of sleeping, somebody would have snuck into, the young boy's house. They would have placed a towel over his face, as this would have had something to knock the young boy out. And when the boy had awoken, he was dangling from, a pretty high up mountain. As the boy would look down, as he could see a body of water with piranhas and sharks. As the boy would say, what is this? Where am I? This, mind you, Deku would only be about, he'd be 7 at the time, why not? As Deku would look up, as he'd see the villagers. The boy would be, met by the angry glances of all of the villagers, as they'd say, "Die, you demon!" As Deku would say, "I'm not a demon. Please stop." As the people wouldn't listen. One of the men would come up to the rope that was holding Deku up, as he began cutting it. As Deku would beg for the man to stop, pleading, in fact. As the man would continue cutting, but Deku didn't want to hurt him. Because, he was too nice for his own good, to be specific. Deku would fall after the man had completely cut the rope. Deku would try to use his fire, or his hellfire, to, kind of rappel up into the air, but yeah, that didn't work out as Deku would have planned. It was way too cold for him to use his fire in the mountains, and his metal, to be frankly honest with you, Deku barely knew how to control it, so, he was out of luck. The young boy would have then fell into the ocean. There, his body would be torn to shreds, as he would try to fight the piranhas and the sharks. But after the sharks smelled the blood, it was pretty much over. After all of that, the young boy would awaken, his body in hell. He would look around to be met with the face of Satan. As Satan would say, I am your master. You will serve me, and only me. The only way you can escape this wretched place is by ending me. And nobody has been able to do it yet. As he would then look over to, the bones that were piled up pretty much everywhere, seeing that Satan was also sitting on a throne made of bones. As Satan would have had a pretty big smirk on his face, as he'd have said, but you were born with the power of hellfire. So, I have high hopes. As Satan would have then snapped his fingers as Izuku would have disappeared. Once, the young boy was out of Satan's fortress, he'd wake up in a forest. As he could see beasts looking at him as they would want to eat his body, but Deku, seeing that people were kind of hateful, would, not take pity on the monsters that he was about to kill. Izuku would realize that the world was a cold place, a cold, dark place, where if you wanted to survive, you had to be strong, smart, and outwit your opponent at any given moment, just to live. As Izuku would look around, as he'd say, damn you all. As he would think to himself, as he'd say, I would say damn you all to hell, but you're already here. As Deku would basically swing his hand forward, as a gust of an immense fire would come out of his hand, as this would burn all of the demons to crisps. As this is where Deku would leave off the story for the time being. As he would have got done reading, as he'd have marked his spot, as Deku would have, after reading, go downstairs, as he was pretty hungry. Deku would fix himself a plate of spaghetti. He'd have eaten it and would have joined his family in the TV room who were watching a movie. But now go to Izumi's perspective as she's looking at her brother. So, why is he here? He thinks he's so good. He's really nothing. I could beat him easily if I really wanted to. As Izumi would be pretty pissed off that Izuku beat her ass. As she'd be looking at Izuku, as she'd say, hugging him, my mom like that. As Izuku would kind of be cradled up against Inko. As Izumi would be with her dad, Inko would be, leaning on Izuku because, that's her fucking child. Fuck out of here. No incest ships. Relax. As I'm a fucking idiot. I'm an idiot. It's okay. Matter of fact, you guys go down in the comments. Tell me. I want to hear it. I'm an idiot. But, yeah. They would basically be, cradled up together. It would be kind of warm as they would be sharing the same blanket. Oh my god, this just sounds incest. But it wouldn't be too bad because Izumi and her father were doing the same thing. Izumi would still be jealous that Inko is paying so much attention to Izuku. She pretty much hated Izuku's guts for the mere fact that he was quirkless, but this wouldn't bother Izuku. He still liked his sister. He just thought that her ways were wrong. She shouldn't judge by quirks. She should judge by character. This is the way Izuku was taught. But I'll get into that probably in another part, because that's where I'm gonna explain. Well, I'll explain his backstory throughout multiple parts, but yeah, I'll explain who trained Deku in the next part. As Deku, well, he wouldn't be too fond of his father, seeing that he already knew that his father would just want to use him for money, seeing that he could read his mind. When Deku's eyes turned yellow, or, well, any color to be specific, his eyes would automatically allow him to read mind, but the color of his eye would depend on what fire he was using. Say his eyes turned black, Deku would be using, well, his demonic flames. His demonic, he calls them, he'll call them his demonic he'll call them his satanic flames. Is Deku would have said, or he'd have looked at his father, as he'd have tried to sense what he was thinking now, but he'd see that his father would strictly be focused on the movie. Izuku didn't really care for movies, but if it meant that he got to spend time with his family, he wasn't tripping. Because Izuku never had a family where he was from. Or he did, but they were killed. As we now go back to the alternate universe, we see just after Deku had been pretty much cut off the cliff, his mother and his father would have came in. As they would see Deku falling, as they'd say, "What the hell did you bastards do to our son?" As the people would have said, "That demon had to go. He could have burned down the village or something." As one of the men would have came up behind Deku's father, he'd have said, "Look, Ray, your son. I know he meant a lot to you, but he had to die." As Ray would have looked at the man with, well, anger in his eyes. It would be at least 20,000 villagers in, like, one huge village. But Ray would look at this man as Ray's eyes would turn yellow, as he would only have been able to unlock hellfire. He would hit this man directly in his fucking jaw, demon style, as he would have basically pieced the fuck out of this man. He'd have beat the shit out of him, demon style. This nigga running their shit. As him and his wife, Kara, why not? Well, they would be fighting together. They would both have the power of... No. I would say that Kara was a water user. Why not? She had water manipulation. They would both be fighting the villagers, seeing that they were still pissed off that their son was killed, but they would have been slain. Mind you, they were like thousands upon thousands of villagers, and they just kept coming. As Ray and Kara would eventually get tired, a few of the people would have caught them lacking, as they'd have stabbed spears straight through their bodies. As Kara and, well, Ray would have coughed up blood. They'd have both fell to their knees as, in their last moments, Kara and Ray would have looked at each other, as they would have held hands and raised their hands up high, as they'd say, "Izuku." Or Ray would say, no. Kara would say, "Izuku, we know that you're alive, and wherever you are, please take our power." As they would then see a burst of orange light come upon, well, everything. As this burst of light would destroy everything within a 5-mile radius, as it would basically kill all of the villagers, except for a few. I'll say a few survived, because they'll be important soon. Or they'll be Deku's victims. his first victims. But yeah, this power that Ray and Kara would travel to hell is Deku's body. It would be sent, well, into somewhat of a paralysis state as it would consume this power. As they could say, what is this? Oh, and by the way, if you guys are wondering why Deku's in hell and not in heaven, seeing that he never committed a sin in his life, except for just like murdering those other demons, but I don't really think that's bad. But the reason he's in hell is because Deku was born with hellfire. If you're born with hellfire, you're automatically going to hell. But yeah, and don't worry, Deku's parents, yeah, they're both going to hell together. But in this, what if hell's not actually a bad place? It is for people who deserve it, but like, yeah, they don't deserve it. Deku's father was just born with hellfire, and his mother just killed a bunch of people as they were sending their power away. So this would basically be why they were going to hell. But yeah, Deku would get this power as well, he would continue to fight the demons. His Deku's training would have only just began. We now go back to the original, or the fucking Deku of the present now. We're gonna have a time skip. Another year. And in this year, Deku, well, he's fully mastered his dark flame as he'd practiced on it every day. And each time he'd have burned his arm more and more. It would have left a bunch of scars, but Deku would have just bandaged his arm up as he'd have kept it going. Deku would have basically been raised on training. After, well, a few months of Deku relaxing, him, his father, his mother, and his sister began, well, training. Izuku, obviously being the strongest one, would be taught by his father, who would have a water manipulation quirk. As I'll say that Inko, well, she had a telekinesis quirk. As Izumi would basically just, I guess, follow after her parents in a way. But yeah, Deku would, well, beat the absolute shit out of he'd beat the absolute shit out of Izumi every day, as she'd challenge him literally every day, as Izuku would have to knock her back down into her place literally every day. Is after a few months of this, well, Hiyashi would have started sparring with Deku instead of letting Izumi continue with this, because at this rate, she'd probably die. No, literally, no cap. She'd probably die if she continued. But yeah, Deku would have had a little bit more of a challenge, seeing that he'd also be wearing weights while fighting, and these were weights made by Deku's enchantments. They would be like weighted seals, having at least 5 tons in each one. Deku would be tremendously slow. He'd be at like a regular human speed. As his punches would pack a pretty decent punch, but shit, they'd still be slow. As Deku would, well, be fighting his father, as he'd look up and say, "Can I take these weights off, please?" As he'd kind of be tired of fighting in them. As his father would say, "No, it's a part of your training. Now come on." As they would continue their fight, as Izuku would end up being beaten by his father. Hiyashi, well, he'd take more of an endeavor role, I'd have to say, yeah. He'd take more of an endeavor role towards Deku, seeing that he also wanted one of his children to surpass All Might. So he would basically train Izumi, and he'd take over Izumi's training from Inko, as he thought that Inko was being too soft. So, well, he trained Izumi and Izuku at the same time. as his training would be pretty harsh, but well, they weren't really worried about it as they'd get through it every day. As eventually, Izumi would have seen that her brother wasn't that bad of a guy. He always helped her when her dad was picking on her for being weak, but she really wasn't weak. Like for her age, she's strong. Not Deku strong, but she's strong. But yeah, she'd see that Izuku wasn't as bad as she thought. Is after their training, she'd walk up to him. She'd say, "Big brother." As Izuku wouldn't have heard this like for a decent amount of time. As he'd have looked back, as Izumi would have hugged him and said, "I'm sorry for all of the ways I have treated you. I have treated you bad so longly. I've treated you bad so long, and you've always been there for me. I'm sorry." As Izuku would accept the hug, as he'd just chuckle a bit and say, "It's alright. You're my sister after all. I love you." As Izumi would have hugged her brother tighter, as Izuku, couldn't breathe at this point, as he said, "Izumi, I can't breathe." As Izumi would have let go of her brother, as she'd have chuckled nervously. And after this little interaction, they'd have dinner. This next day, after dinner, they'd wash up and go to sleep. The next day, him and Izumi would be told that they were going to school. They were supposed to start last year, but, they were supposed to start when they were 5, but, Hiyashi wasn't fucking around about their training. And so, Is the day, or once the day came for them to go to school, Deku would basically put on a white college shirt, or a white button-up shirt, some black jeans, and some black shoes. He'd have walked into class, as Deku would have looked like he was going to church or something. But this was no. I'd say he wear black boots. Yeah. Black boots. Yeah. Deku would have looked like he was on some army shit. Yep, there we go. As Bakiko, just off of seeing Izuku, would have made fun of him. As Izumi would have stepped up for her big brother, she'd say, "Hey, shut up!" As Bakiko would have said, "Oh yeah? And if I don't, what are you gonna do?" As he'd have set off a bunch of little explosions. Izumi was not having this shit. She did not give a fuck. She sent 5 water spikes toward this nigga, as she didn't want to kill him, so she'd just have him dissolve on impact. As this would pretty much hit and hurt Bakugo, as he'd kind of be knocked down in pride a little bit. As Izumi would say, "Yeah, that's what you get for talking about my brother." As Izuku would just have a smile on his face, as he'd come over to Izumi, as he'd pat her head and say, "It's fine, Izumi. Don't let weak people like that bother us." As they would just go, sit down at the table, as they'd get their day with school over, as they would try to walk home, but they would be cornered by fucking Bakugo's goons along with him. Deku, seeing this, would say, "Izumi, I got this." His Bakugo would say, "Oh yeah? This time I won't let you. Last time, you just got some lucky hits, that's all. You're not beating me this time." As Deku would have said, "Yeah, whatever you say." As Deku would have made a metal staff. Oh, and by the way, Deku would not have told the class that he's quirkless yet. That hasn't happened yet, so for the time being, Deku's pulling hoes. As, he would use the metal staff that he had just created to beat the fuck out of Bakugo and his goons. And after that, he'd throw the Bakugo, or he'd throw Bakugo against the wall, as he'd say, "And if you attack us again, it'll be worse the next time." As he would throw his spear directly at Bakugo, as it would pierce his shirt, sticking Bakugo to the wall. As Izumi would have smiled and say, "Good job, big bro." As her and Izuku would have basically had a high five as they'd have went home. Fast forward the next day, it would be the weekend. As Deku would be Deku would be like what, 5? Yeah, 5. Yeah. He would basically pretty much ask his mom if he could go to the park. She would allow this, as Deku would go alone, seeing that Izumi really didn't want to go, and well, it was only a few minutes away from his apartment, probably like 5. Because after Deku would have got there, he would see Bakugo picking on a little girl. This young girl would have purple hair, as she'd look like this. She'd be black. Yeah. Beautiful. But, yeah. Izuku would see this girl as his heart would start to flutter, as Izuku would say, "What is this?" As at this rate, Deku, he wouldn't have the mind of a 32-year-old man. He wouldn't think this was weird, because, like, he's, like, 5. Is Deku would, well, feel compelled to go over there and help the young girl. Just once he did this, Bakugo would see Izuku, and not wanting to be beaten up, he'd run away. Deku would have said, "Yeah, that's what I thought, you loser." He'd have looked at the young girl, he'd have said, "Are you alright?" The girl would have said, "Yeah, thank you." Deku would have laughed and said, "I'm Izuku. What's your name?" The young girl would have said, "Yuri." Deku would have said, "Yuri. I like that name." The girl would have blushed, as Deku would have seen this, as he'd have had a small blush on his face. Deku would have then said, "Do you want to play with me?" Pause, firstly. Pause. I can't. No, I'm stupid, yo. But, yeah, the girl would, or Yuri would say yes, as they'd go off and they'd begin playing with each other. Yuri and Deku would basically end up playing with each other every day. Sometimes Izumi, well, like 50% of the time, Izumi would join them, as they began to, well, become an inseparable trio. Izumi could tell that her brother kinda liked, well, Yuri, and Yuri kinda liked her brother. As she'd basically be playing matchmaker, and in a few months, well, she'd finally do it. Hold on, guys. Alright, guys, I'm back. But, yeah. Izuku, well, he'd have went to Yuri's, no. Yuri would have went to Izuku's 6th birthday party. And yes, Yuri is gonna be older than Izuku. She'll be, 6.5, about to turn 7. Yeah, why not? She'd went to Izuku's 6th birthday party. She'd have came in bearing gifts, as Yuri came from a pretty wealthy family, actually. She'd have held 2 gifts in her hand. Izuku would have saw Yuri, as he'd have ran over and hugged her. As she'd have hugged him back and said, "Oh, Izuku, I brought you gifts." As she'd have gestured to the both of her hands. As Deku would have said, "Oh yeah, just put them over there. And come on, we're playing tag." Yuri would do what Izuku said, is she'd have put the gifts on the table, or the gift table. Oh yeah, it's, aren't they twins? Yeah. So it's Izumi and Izuku's birthday. Why not? Why not? Yeah. So Yuri would have bought gifts for both of them, as instead of just Izuku. No, I'll say Izuku just hugged her. Is well, her and fucking Izumi would have, I guess, side hugged or whatever. But yeah, they would have continued playing tag until it was time to eat the cake and open the presents. As at this rate, it would only be those three and a few adults, as be consisting of like Yuri's mom and a few other, well, parents that liked Izuku and his sister, and I guess a few people from the school. But yeah, that doesn't matter. But yeah, they would begin to open presents, as well. Deku, well, he'd have gotten to Izumi's present for him, as they would have both gotten each other presents, as Izumi would have said, "Tell her how you feel," as that was what the card said. Deku knew what she meant, but he'd basically give her a glance in confusion, as Izumi would blurt out, "Izuku likes Yuri," as Deku's whole face would have turned red, as well, everybody would have been shocked, as Yuri would have also been shocked because, well, she liked Izuku, as Deku would have said, "Knock it off," as Yuri would have said, "Izuku, is that true?" As Deku would have said, "Yeah, it is." Is all of the adults would have been like, "Damn, kids is really out here confessing feelings and shit. What are they on?" As Yuri would have looked at Deku, as she'd have said, "Well, I kind of like you too." Is at this rate, all of the adults, yeah, their jaws are on the ground, especially Yuri's mom. Yuri's mom is basically like, "She keeps no secrets from me, but she never told me she likes this boy. Damn, what else is she hiding?" As well, Izuku, well, and Yuri, well, they'd have made it official. Is Deku would have said, "All right, little sis, now open your present for me." Is fuck, she'd have opened his present. Is it would have been an iPod. I give her an iPhone, not an iPod 10 Max. Is she'd have been begging her parents for this, or no, I'll say her parents didn't know about this. I'll say her parents didn't know she wanted this. As Deku, well, he would have gotten this for her. As they'd have said, "Izuku, where did you come up with the money to buy this? And we didn't even know she wanted this." As Izumi would have rushed over to our brother. As well, she'd have slipped something into his pocket, but she'd have continued hugging him. As she'd have been kissing him on his cheek, saying, "Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you." As well, everybody would have laughed at this. As well, after the party was over, Yuri and her mom went home, as Yuri would look back at Izuku and, well, Izumi, as she'd say, "Bye," as she'd then leave, but before she looked away, Izumi, or not Izumi, Izuku, no, fuck that, Izumi, yes, I meant Izumi. Izumi would wink at her, as, fucking Yuri would smile. We now have a flashback, as we see, well, Yuri and Izumi in a bathroom. As she'd say, or Izumi would say, "Do you like my brother?" As Yuri'd say, "What?" As Izumi would have said, "You heard me. Do you like my brother?" As Izumi would say, "Well, yeah, I do." As well, not Deku, fuck. Izumi would have said, well then, I have a plan. As she'd have whispered her fucking plan to, well, yeah, Yuri, as, yeah, that's how that whole deku Lexi, um, Yuri came into play. Yeah, that's how that came into play. But yeah, now we go back to the present day, as Izuku would have looked at his sister and said, huh, what's this card? As he'd have looked in it, as Izumi would have found out an interesting piece of information about her father. As Deck would have said, if this is real, we need to tell Mom now. As it would be a picture of him with another woman. But guys, I'm gonna leave it off here because I need to go eat. I'll probably do a part 2 soon, but make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe. Tell me what you guys want next, cause like, yeah, I'm really finna get into part 2s and shit now. But yeah, bye.